This is Signature Gold. .TV.
Stand by for transmission.
This is Smithy.tv.
I've eaten lots of food, I've had lots to drink, and then I went and took a piss. Then I turned on this podcast that is called Cast This!
We're shooting this today with the red cam. My face is red. It only makes people look red, the red cam. It's a cheaper version of the red cam this week.
Hello.
Hi. Ryan Goldhar, James Scott.
James Scott.
We've got a new song for you here. Should we do the
I think
song
we should start again.
Okay. If you want a man who can cast, direct, or teach, I think you should turn your attention to
Ron Leech.
All right. Make sure you cut to Ron there.
Oh, you're directing too.
Yeah, taking
That's
over.
amazing.
Taking over.
This is not just a little like a little pony show we got going.
No.
No,
It's a big pony
remarkably
show.
passive aggressive.
We use horses.
Yeah, it's a Clydesdale of a show. It is.
Oh, so he's not casting anymore.
Yeah. Why didn't Budweiser...
We didn't invite him.
Budweiser...
Hi, welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So this, to give you an idea, welcome to our show. We do a little focusing.
Do you?
On the lives and careers of our guests as well as our own, because, well, what the hell, it's our show.
Exactly.
Various personalities in the industry. And, Ron, you're a bit of a legend.
I am.
You've had your... you've dipped your toes in many different aspects of the film and television business over the years.
Polite way of saying I can't keep a job.
That's none of my business, Ron. Let's. Should we start with what's happening right now, or should we go?
Why
back
not? I think
through history?
let's go from the future to the past.
Oh, wow.
So,
Like the time
right now,
travel.
what of the many hats that you wear? What are you donning these days?
I'm wearing 4 hats at the moment. So right
Invisible,
now I'm
the Emperor's new hats.
The Emperor's new hats. I'm
Yeah.
my jaunty hat is my casting hat, and I'm casting a television series for MTV right now and Sci-Fi Network.
And it's direct to MTV Canada or MTV?
MTV. And
What's that called?
it's called Scare Tactics.
And what is that about?
It's about 30 minutes. And
We'll be right back.
It's actually an inspired show that combines the skills of reality television with sketch comedy, and we have people who don't know that they're surrounded by actors and that they're being set up for a scare of a lifetime. And
This is the sci-fi aspect of it?
Yeah, I think so. And it was originally produced out of the States. It moved to Canada a couple of years ago, and I have assumed the casting director position on the show.
How do you find people who are ripe for the pumpkin?
That's not my job.
Oh.
We actually have 2 casting directors on the show. There's the reality casting, and as I like to call myself, the fake casting. And the reality casting person is a completely separate division. They're working under a pseudonym, I guess you would call it. They're casting people for reality stars. And you don't know that your interview is actually setting you up for something else.
So they're expecting one thing, and they're brought in knowing that they're being shot.
Yes,
but they don't expect what actually is going to happen.
They don't expect that they're being sorted from the chaff as potential people to be punked. And I bring in a group of actors from Toronto who have a strong improvisational background, who receive direction from their the directors and the writers about what they want to do. So there's very much a kind of theater sport aspect to this, where actors on the fly, they all have earpieces and they're receiving instruction from God, and so it's constantly being changed up. And the scenarios are structured and formalized. All the
like
safety,
directing live television.
Yeah, all the safety nets are there. It is a multiple camera environment, and it's wonderful people and a great deal of fun to do.
Fantastic.
And fantastic opportunity because I'm bringing in a lot of people from sketch comedy and live improvisational theater and stuff, as well as legitimate actors, to populate the scenarios.
Yeah.
So this is your second season doing it, or
this is my first season doing it. It's
second
the second
Toronto.
season. I think it's its second season in Canada.
Right.
Yeah.
And how many total?
This will be the 5th season for the show.
That's great.
Yeah.
Now, do you think they moved to Toronto for budget reasons, or do you think they moved there for just environmental reasons?
You know, I don't. You
Or
know,
they're
that's a
getting too well-known
that's
in
a
the States.
producerial question. I think it's easy to fly under the radar near
always
here.
fun to guess.
And that's yes, exactly. I think that, you know, I think there are a number of different aspects about producing anything in Toronto, which I would recommend to any producer in the world. We have unbelievably fantastic crews that have been built up over the years, the boom years, as we used to remember them. There's fantastic. This is yes, and that's Boom Shadow. And the talent pool here is as deep as it can get.
Yeah.
And because Canadian actors have to be chameleons and have to do everything in order to be able to pay their mortgage, they're very elastic and they're very directable. And they go from a radio audition or recording in the morning to doing a commercial audition or shoot in the afternoon to coming out for a theater thing at night. They're doing the Fringe Festival at the same time as they're doing animation for Nelvana. I mean, our resumes are so deep, and as a result of that experience, the acting here is, I think, the best you can find in the world.
Well, it's pretty high praise. I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm just saying it's amazingly high praise.
There is a difference though, and to drift into my other hat, which is that I'm an acting teacher. I've been teaching acting for the camera for 13 years now, and there's an attitudinal difference between Canadian actors and actors in Los Angeles and New York, for example, when I'm casting in those markets. And that is that the Canadian actors want to be liked more than they want to be hired. And they come in with their hat in their hand, and they're all so nice and so happy to be in the room, and kind of forget that I'm really looking for them to be a bastard at times. And that sometimes, you know, American actors come out of the gate, they can't wait for the bell to go off, like a prize
do their
fighter.
thing and leave and get
and they're much more about their business. They don't really... They're not having tea with me. They're here to compete.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I teach actors is how to compete in my audition masterclasses. It's, you know, there's a set way to prepare so that you're more successful than the other person. And B, there's a way to walk into that room because you're being judged the second the door opens. And the first question anybody wants to know sitting behind the desk is, does that actor want to be here?
Right.
And it's remarkable the number that don't. They'd rather be anywhere else on Earth than having to be tested. They just want to be given the job. But they've got to prove to the guy who's not in the room that they're capable of doing it. That's why we have a camera in the room. If it was just the people behind the desk, it would be easy to cast. But there's somebody in a network office somewhere who's got his finger on the skip button watching the DVD at the end of the session.
Doesn't care about them shaking the guy's hand at the beginning of the audition.
No, never sees it.
Yeah.
Never sees that. He sees slate, act, right? And he sees whether or not you're a horse in a trail ride following the script slavishly, or you're a thinking actor who's making his own choices. And the thinking actor gets hired.
Although you also find, I guess, and sometimes the point is like when people like are so strong about, you know, stay on the page. And I know that there's some, I mean, from casting director's perspective, each one has their own different rules as well of what they're looking for, because you are someone who's more than willing to see what they can bring to the table.
Oh, and I love it.
Right.
I regard casting as the biggest train set in the world, and I'm the engineer for an afternoon. You know, I get to wear the hat and go choo-choo. And it's just like the actors come into the room. Here's the thing that you have to bear in mind. Every actor competing against you has exactly the same pages. Yeah. If you all take your notes from the page, I see 8 identical performances. So I just have to hire the girl with the bigger breasts. I mean, end of story.
Yeah.
Right? Because you haven't given me choice. But if you think about the way scripts are written, the writers don't know where to put direction on the page.
Right.
And they generally place the direction about the character's reaction to the event in the scene in the scene
dialogue.
setup, right? And not in the middle of the dialogue where the reaction would be, right? They don't stop after the active verb and put bracket, much to so-and-so's surprise, right? And so you have to hunt and peck. Your first job as an actor is to figure out why the scene is in the movie.
Yeah.
And there'll be a moment in the scene that pushes the plot forward. And that's the moment that you need to be reactive at. If you come in telling me how you're going to react, you've done a one-note scene. And everything looks like a soap opera. And it's indication.
But we like soap operas.
only for the porn aspects of it, and
Yes.
and you
it's creative use of exposition.
yeah. Well, no, and slow camera pushes.
Oh, of course. I mean,
Extremely slow camera
it's
pushes.
very, very like giving Visconti
The
a
land
run
of
for his
stretch.
money. Yeah, that's
The
right.
land of
That's-
stretch.
That's right.
No, the tragedy of training for actors is that almost all the training that's available for actors in the marketplace, and this is true globally, I think, is that everything is based upon theater. And theater is the foundation of strong choices as a performer, your understanding of text analysis, your ability to be connected to your emotional core values
Right.
and bring those forward and play those. That's all stuff that theater teaches you. But then the camera is such a uniquely
It's a magnifying glass.
well, it is an absolute magnifying glass. It stretches a
reasons.
pause. It takes a tick and turns it into a freak out. And you see these people who come in and their eyebrows
They
are
get
doing
the bug
their work.
eyes too. It's like they do the wide
And the
eyes.
people who
suddenly
pronate when they talk, they have to punctuate their words.
Right.
And it's like I'm looking for the grain that was left on the ground by the last pigeon feeder that was in the room. And it's like, what are you doing? It's not, and then you have a conversation with them when the camera's not on, and they sit there in complete repose, using their natural voice, not putting any volume behind it, and they're completely captivating.
Mm-hmm.
And you say action, and they turn into some, over-animated fool. And you just got to strip all that away.
Brought on by teachings from their parents from their first audition.
Well, it's really funny because, and James knows this from the time that we spent in the room casting, and that is you see these kids walk into the room to do a spot, and and they they do their slight little men, and you start the scene, and they go, "Hi, Dad," and you look at them and you go, "Is that how you talk to your father?" They go, "No." I said, "Well, how would you say hi to your father if you walk into the room right now?" I go, "Hey, Dad." I said, "Why don't you say it like that?" Who taught you that other way of saying
what's
that?
your dad's
You
name?
know? Yeah.
Ward?
And it's and it's, of course Mom has driven them down from Scarborough or the Jane Finch corridor, and in the car down there giving them line readings, line by line by line. And the first thing you do is have to smack their mother's bad teaching off of them, and let the kid be natural.
But the problem is they don't want to go against what their parents have asked them to do either, and that's a big problem.
It's true. But some kids are really
vibrating.
smart.
Some
It's
are.
really shocking, the little humans that come into the room and freak you out.
It also can soak up information so fast.
Really amazing.
Yeah.
But the thing, you have to understand, small children are completely unguarded. They don't have the filters that we learn through self-awareness. We hit puberty, and every kid has that season of zits and tits where they're like totally insecure. And if they're as actors, that's a death knell, because self-awareness and it destroys your ability to be unconscious while you work. And there's a wonderful book by Yoshi Oida called The Invisible Actor, and it talks about actors ridding themselves of ego in order to be able to be truthfully reacting the way the character would behave. And you vanish and you channel the character, and it's brilliant, the concepts behind it, but it's damned difficult because we are so consciously self-aware. Small children,
It's
they don't
finding
care.
zen.
The whole world is a sandbox to a child.
Yeah.
Everything is discovery.
Yeah.
And as adults, we think we know everything, and we're too egotistical to deny that we don't. That's why men won't ask for directions when they're driving, right?
I
It's
don't
the
know what
same
you
rule.
mean.
No, yes, you do.
It is,
Speaking of directions, Ron, you've directed.
Wow,
So,
what
do you
a
like that
segue.
Segway.
That was pretty
He's
impressive.
driving a two-wheeled machine.
Yeah.
That was pretty impressive.
You were telling me before we started that you directed 2 short films which have been making the rounds in international film festivals in one weekend.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about how these things got...
Well, actually,
got made, really.
it started a year ago. Well, now 18 months ago, as a kind of journey. I was approached by Dan Abramovici, who is a wonderful sketch comedy artist here in Toronto. He's also a very fine photographer, and he was one of my students in my acting classes. And he had cut together a demo reel that he wanted me to look at. And there was a sketch comedy routine on his demo reel that just didn't belong on an actor's reel. It was shot in a comedy club by a prosumer Canada camera at the back of the room with all the room noise and people clapping and hollering and drinks being served. And I said, I said, get that off of there. It doesn't belong on your acting demo reel. But I said, boy, what a great sketch. It would make a fantastic short film. So he called me about 2 months later and to read this script that he'd written, which was an adaptation of the sketch. And he asked me if I would direct it. And I did. That's a film called Helpline. And while we were posting Helpline, his partner in his sketch comedy troupe, Andrea Fletcher, called me, and she said, you know, I have 2 skits that I'd love you to have a look at. And she sent me Altercations and Shaky Grounds. Shaky Grounds wasn't called Shaky Grounds at that time. It was called something else, and something Stalker. And so I read them, and I loved them. They were very much my sense of humor, which is to say that they were quite profoundly bent, and they were a bit black comedy-like, and as was Helpline. Helpline was the story of a young man who goes to work at a suicide prevention agency and ends up instructing people on how to commit suicide. And Shaky Grounds is the story of a young woman who walks into a coffee shop, and standing behind the counter as the barista is the boy she knows as her stalker. But she hasn't seen him of late and wants to know, where the hell have you been? and then competes to get him back because he has abandoned her for a new victim. And Altercations is the most elaborate of the 3 films, and it's the story of a young couple who are engaged to be married, who invite their priest in to give them some counsel before the wedding, and it goes horribly awry. Basically the woman is having difficulties with her fiancé because he wants to change all the wedding plans, and change them into something horrible. And instead of agreeing with her that this should all be perfect and genteel and, you know, polite, the priest is agreeing that, you know, yes, we should have a wedding march by 9 Inch Nails and this sort of thing. And we've had tremendous success from the films. We shot Helpline in 1 day in 2 locations here in Toronto on a Canon 7D camera. And then we pulled a crew together and we shot Shaky Grounds and Altercations in 1 weekend. On a red cam.
How many locations did you use for those?
1 location each film. And so we shot Altercations on the Saturday in Andrea's apartment out in the Humber Valley. Mm-hmm. And it's a very old Tudor-style home with creaky floors, much to the bane of our sound man's existence.
Yeah, I bet.
So how many pages per script are you saying, like 8-page scripts? Or?
Yeah, approximately. I'd say we had a story meeting on each script before we shot. So we met at my apartment on the Thursday evening, and I actually cut about 20%. Right. Of the language out of the script, knowing that in shooting I'd be adding that elasticity back in. So the altercations to time on the voice was 4-minute script, but it's 6 minutes in production. Right. And similarly with Shaky Grounds, we pared it down. We made sure I don't like passive grammar, and actors tend to modify language a lot. And
what do you mean by passive grammar?
When people describe what they're doing as opposed to just doing it, you know, it's like
the exposition we were talking about.
Yeah, exactly. But also that thing where it says, well, when characters are musing about what they're going to do before they then do it, and you don't need to muse, just do. And so we cut out a lot of that language, a lot of the modifying language, so that it became more didactic and precise and made it very lean. I think one of the best compliments I got at the Big Bear Lake International Film Festival, a vice president of Sony came up to me and said that he was really startled at how sophisticated the scripts were in their parody. There was just it was just the language, every word was purposeful and got a reaction and pushed story forward. And I thought that was the best compliment we could have received from an industry professional. Yeah. You know, and we premiered the films there, and have since been in 14 international film festivals, and we've won 8 awards.
And what's the most recent festival you were
The most recent festival was the Worldwide Short Film Festival here in Toronto, so it was nice to come home.
That's part of the Film Center.
Yes, Canadian Film Center produces and hosts it. And I have to say, my hat's off to them. Having traveled around to quite a few festivals now, we are so spoiled at the quality of the production of our festivals. I think TIFF sets the benchmark. And Worldwide Short Film Festival, with much fewer resources, easily steps up and matches them in terms of skill, in terms of organization, in terms of publication, promotion, in terms of networking. I was startled at how good it was, and more than shocked at the ineptitude of many of the international festivals I've been to. It seems to me most of the festivals are managed and directed by middle-aged women in fluffy tracksuits they got at Old Navy. It's just shocking. And
It's like the members of the MPAA.
I have these beautiful programs from these festivals, but none of the films played when they were supposed to.
What?
None of them. No,
The person who designed the Italian train schedules?
I think so. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, and so we are very spoiled. And,
What venue were they shown at?
At the Varsity Cinema.
Oh, great.
At the Royal Ontario Museum Cinema in their basement, which is a beautiful venue.
Yeah.
And I think they had one other venue, and I can't recall. But because I live above the Varsity Cinemas, that was pretty much my haunt.
Yeah, that's
It's like I take the elevator to a movie. It was really cool.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
To your own movie.
To my own movie.
That's pretty good.
And we had great reception.
That's
We had great
excellent.
reception. We lost. Many of the filmmakers were saying that we were a shoe-in for audience favorite award. And then this little movie called The Garofalo from England showed up, which starred Helena Bonham Carter and Tom Wilkinson and just an all-star
cast.
all-star cast who lent some time away from the Royal Academy to drop in and make a little movie. And it was just like I'm sitting in the
Looked like
audience,
pulling
it's
some
like going,
favors.
oh my God, I'm watching this beautiful film. And I leaned into my DOP, Ryan Knight, who was sitting beside me. I said, "How did that feel?" And he said, "What?" I said, "You just got buggered by the British." I said,
We should take a break.
Exactly. Well, we'll be right back after these messages.
Wow. Everything she touches reminds her of a lost love. And here she is with somebody she doesn't even know that she's fucked the shit out of. And she wants to know where her love, what is love, is the title of the film. So what happened was that we start in the present shooting in the red cam, and every flashback to a past relationship is shot in a camera format that is would be appropriate to the time of the memory.
Right. Whether it's a
So
camera phone or whether it's
we shot in high 8.
Yeah.
We shot on an iPhone. We shot on a Canon 7D. We shot on an SLR digital camera in GIF mode.
Yeah.
And the red cam.
Nice.
And it looks beautiful.
nice perspective.
It looks really beautiful. And I use light as my transitional point. And so
Like kind of whiteout sort of
yeah,
things? Yeah.
we did what I've got a number of shots that I'm very proud of in the thing. We were shooting at a skating rink out in Kipling, and it was a very, very overcast day, but the sun was setting, and as the sun was setting, it suddenly came out from under the clouds.
Nice.
So it was shooting straight across the rink. So I had my two stars skate out and come towards the camera, and as they skated by, we unhooked the lens and took it off the camera. And so you get this sort of parabolic kind of, almost chiaroscuro kind of weird effect as they sort of morph, and then this burn out. It's an in-camera effect that worked
Nice.
beautifully, and it ends the relationship. It's the last time we see that love in her life. We shot another shot, which I'm immensely proud of. It was a very hot sex scene, which we shot in my apartment up on the 34th floor in the Manulife. And the girl is in this big club chair in my window, and the young boy is making love to her. And but it happens very fast, much faster than she would like. And so he hasn't got a lot of staying power. And what I did was I turned off all the lights in the apartment. I put a nice blue light just above them to put some light on their shoulders, and a little underlight just to light their eyes. And then I dropped the camera, and she falls into the chair. He falls down in front of her, pulls her into him, and they make love. He comes and goes, and as he pulls off of her, she curls herself up, both to protect her modesty and in terms of storytelling. And we pan up her body. What I'd done was I turned off all the lights in my apartment, and I actually unscrewed all the lights in my apartment, and I left one pot on in the hall. And so as we pan up past her, we're looking at her with a cityscape behind her, and I've got the most beautiful view of the city, and all of a sudden we see this flash of light as the boy, naked, walks through the light in reflection in the mirror. And it's the last time we see him.
Nice.
He disappears. And it was all done in one shot. And I was just like, and it was like when I was setting it up, Ryan was like, going, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" I said, "You'll see." Right? And I said, "Let's just do a walkthrough." And it was just like, and he went, because you see the reflection in the window.
Oh, that's great.
You know, and then we push past that to the cityscape and focus it out, and it all dissolves out in a twinkle of starlight. Yeah. And that dissolves to Nathan Phillips Square at Christmas time with all the Christmas lights over the skating rink. Skating is a recurrent theme because the greatest love of her life, all they did, they skated together. And
she's skating through life.
And she's skating through life, very much so. Yeah.
So let's go back.
Hey, wait. Are we back on the show yet?
Oh, we've been back for ages.
Did we record all that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you're kidding, really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God. There you
Why
go.
not?
Oh, excellent.
Let's
And
go.
we've been back. So,
You're so transfixed with this. Let's go back in time now. Like we
well,
started.
I
the
want to
premise.
ask about one more thing because
Please.
you mentioned it before.
Yeah.
Also, just because you've got all these, because I asked about the hats. We were talking about all.
Well,
the
that was
hats.
the
All the
directing.
hats I wear.
Directing hat, but I think in combination with directing, you've also been producing. You were telling me about a web series that you've been doing. So,
Oh, yeah, it's true.
So what is this?
I have, well, a very, very good friend of mine is one of the world's leading specialists and actual sort of change makers in the area of diversity in hiring practices and in creating workplace safety. He came to me. His name is Michael Bach. He's the vice president of diversity for KPMG. And he's in the paper just about every week speaking on this subject because it's a new hot button subject in the world of big banks and financial institutions and hiring practices in government and private business. And he came to me because he travels the globe teaching companies how to hire diversely and how then to treat these people that you would normally, that they haven't seen heretofore in their workplace. And so it covers issues of ageism, sexual orientation, ethnicity, culture, you name it, and gender, and even transgender. And so he's been traveling around the world teaching this to companies, but he gets a little tired, and he can only be so many places at the same time. And so he had the idea, in talking with me, of creating his educational program into a web series and making that available on a subscription basis to large corporations. And so we just shot a 20-part web series, both in French and English, of these, what he calls diversity moments, which are a wide range of topics dealing with this issue.
Is he the on-camera personality?
No, not at all. We hired actors to portray all of these things.
So these are enacted situations.
No, they're lectures. They are.
Okay.
But the way I cast it, because I mix my hats,
Of course.
was I said, okay, you're doing these educational modules on the subject of diversity. We really ought to use diversity in hiring to illustrate what we're talking about. So when one of the diversity moments dealt with the subject of ageism, it started out with a very, very young, youthful person speaking to the issue of differences in age and perspective based upon life experience. And as we would dissolve and cut to different people, we would dissolve to an older person, someone who was more mature, who had life experience that they were just talking about, so that the moments actually reflect the topic that we're dealing with in the diversity moment. And I'm quite proud. It looks really good. We shot it all in a green screen environment, and it was hard going because of the nature of the material and the complexity of the dialogue, particularly in the French language translation. The French grammar alone adds about 20% to your time. And about 200% to your frustration. And de Gaulle was right when someone asked him once about why he was such a failure as the president. And he said, "How could anyone govern a country that has 1,000 different kinds of cheese?" It's kind of like that.
And half of them taste the same. No.
Yes. Well, there's nothing wrong with stinky cheese. No. Not in my world. A dry martini and some stinky cheese, I'm happy, man.
That'll be on your gravestone.
Yes, that's it. That's not the epitaph I had in mind.
But it's a perfect venue to sell profiles like that. If you have, you're saying 20 parts. It's 20 parts French and English.
Yes.
You go to any company around the world and you don't even have to move.
Well, and it just scratches the surface.
Yeah.
of the material. It is so complex and myriad, and I have such an enormous appreciation for it now. It's not an area that I really put a lot of conscious thought to, but it's interesting because my history, going into my past and my other hats, was that I always regarded myself as somewhat of a game changer on the subject of diversity. I was one of the first talent agents in Canada to have a very richly diverse roster and to break the color barrier here, because it was a very white Anglo-Saxon Protestant town when I started in the business, and representing African American artists and Asian artists and artists of mixed race, you didn't get a lot of opportunities for them to get hired. And I kind of forced that. And when I stopped being a talent agent and moved into the realm of casting, one of the benchmarks that I really wanted to make a sort of signifier of my career and my voice, if you will, as a casting person, was that I wanted my casts to look like life and to be diverse. And so I've always cast against type, for example. I've always tried to find opportunities where bringing an African American artist or Hispanic or an Asian or South Asian person into the mix would add a richness and texture and truthfulness to the images that were being portrayed on screen, and make those films then therefore more accessible to a wider audience because people would see themselves in the movie.
Right.
And I think I've been very successful in that regard.
And this is a perfect city for that kind of casting.
Oh my God! Well, we have, we are a mosaic, and we have a rich history of celebrating difference in the city and tolerating difference in this city, and that has given us pools of talent in every ethnic range. So it's, yes, it's not that easy sometimes to cast an all-Iranian family, but I did that in The Crossroads for Alex Thompson, and she was shocked finding a husband and wife and children that all looked like a family that had grown up and lived together and were the subject of a gene pool.
Right.
She wasn't sure whether she'd get to make her movie. And yet, on the first day of casting, in walked these people, 1, 2, 3, 4, right in a row. And she looked at me afterwards and she said, that's ridiculous. The son looked like the father, the daughter looked like the mother and the father looked like they would be in love. And there was our cast.
Acting.
Yeah, it was called acting. Yeah, it is. But and going back, you think about the the work that I did with Claire Walker on series like The Rez and The Black Robe and.
Well, that brings me to the first question I was going to bring in is, so what? I mean, I first met you. I mean, we've known each other a long time. Mm-hmm. You were a talent agent.
Yes, working for your father.
Oh, yes.
Who gave me my start in the business.
No, I was going to say, forget. What brought you to go into casting? Like, what led you to go into that?
Well, I was really a rather successful talent agent, and I was enjoying that life, although it was consumptive. I really did work 24/7 for my talent, and I had the opportunity to greatly expand my business. But to facilitate that expansion, I needed some private capital. And I brought a private investor into my business who turned out to be not a good person to be in business with. And 8 months into that relationship and on the cusp of closing literally a $10 million deal, I discovered that there was a lot of money missing and that there was a lot of accounting malpractice going on. But the only way that I could extricate myself from being involved with this person was to actually close the business.
Right.
And all the deals collapsed. I mean, how do you function in the interim while you're going through that kind of turmoil? And I wasn't able to. I mean, my bank and all of the people that trusted me were willing to assist me in going through that change. But two things happened that sort of stopped it. The first being one actor who was on my roster who I had just renewed for 44 episodes of a television series. Didn't pay his commission.
Right.
And the bank went, "Oh, wait a minute. We have to take this person to court to get the money that you're owed in a business contract. There's like, it's an anathema to a bank that you don't get your money when it's owed to you,
Right.
and that someone can just say, yeah, sue me. And so they did not want to continue to support what they regarded as high-risk venture, which is a tragedy because that actor's behavior supported the bank's assumptions about actors.
Right.
And that they're bad risks.
And one bad egg.
And one bad egg brought down the whole shooting match. To be honest with you, it was probably one of the best things that ever happened in my life. I went through hell. I lost my good name and everything I owned. I literally went from a 3,000 square foot apartment with a Jag parked out back and an apartment in New York in 1990. I was billing $1.5 million a year with only 42 clients. And to living on my mother's couch and having to reinvent myself. And it was hell. And it cost me dearly in health and every other aspect of it and well-being. But I came out of the other end of that process. About 6 months into that process, I was asked by Claire Walker if I would assist her in casting a television series. They needed a lot of stars, guest stars from Hollywood. I had those relationships, and so I was able to cast it in my sleep. And before I finished that series, I'd been approached about casting my own a feature film independently for Peter Simpson at North Star Films, which ended up being a 20-year-long friendship and business relationship.
About him this morning.
And there you go.
Total coincidence.
Peter is one of the great enablers in our business and a true mogul in every sense of the word. He owned his mistakes as well as his successes. And one of my dear friends, I adored him. And he has since passed on due to cancer a couple of years ago. And so I started casting. Interestingly enough, it was exactly 1 year to the day after my business was padlocked that I shot the first foot of film of my first feature film, which was the documentary I produced on Michael Shirtliff, very famous acting teacher and former casting director and good friend. And I didn't know at the time that I was making that film about Michael that I would one day become a teacher myself. It was never on my lexicon. I had no idea that it was going to be in my horizon. But some maybe 7 years later, David Julian Hirsch is one of the stars of Hawthorne in the States, and Naked Josh and Leap Years here in Canada. He came to me and
You had a conversation about him just yesterday.
Wow, this is very
Only
weird.
so many people to talk about.
No,
I know, it's very strange. And we all have them, they're mutual friends and great talents. And David insisted that I teach, and he hounded me for weeks until I agreed. And at first he approached me about teaching because he was taking an on-camera acting class, audition technique class, from a fairly well-known teacher here in Toronto, and he had so many problems with what this guy was saying because David was my reader. And he said, I know that if you do that in the audition room, you will ruin your take. What are you saying to these people? He kept arguing with the teacher. And he came to me and he says, you have to teach. And I went, no, not interested. And I wasn't interested because of my years as a talent agent. It seemed like every time it got slow in Toronto, every knob put out a shingle teaching a course. And it was like every casting director, whether they had any talent or not. And I always felt that they were selling proximity to themselves.
That hasn't changed.
No, I know, you're right. And I always thought they were selling proximity, and I thought that was unseemly, and I didn't want to be branded as that. I wanted to be taken more seriously, and I wanted to give more respect to the talent. And but he really felt that I had a voice, and he continued to chase me. And I said no 3 times in a row. And on his fourth visit to see me, he actually brought me like a stack of checks from actors in that other guy's class, all of whom wanted to study with the guy who'd given him all this knowledge that was so logical. And so with the lure of all that filthy lucre in front of me, I threw my legs in the air and became a teacher. And the rest is history. That was 13 years ago. And I now have taught in Vancouver and Los Angeles, New York, Toronto. I'm actually teaching in Seoul, Korea this fall.
And you have regular courses outside of Toronto. You do regular courses in Montreal and Vancouver, right?
Yes. Yeah, I do masterclasses, weekend masterclasses in those markets because I can't move to those markets and abandon all the other hats that are on a hook here in Toronto. And to do a 6-week course in Vancouver, which would be
why don't we do a push?
difficult.
When is your next one?
Actually, if you go to dynamicsactingschool.com, you'll find, or just ronleech.com, you'll find a portal to my school. And
That is all the coming updates.
Yeah, and it has a calendar on there. It has all the course descriptions as well as testimonials from my students and a little video of me and saying hello and welcome to my school.
Is that all it says?
Pretty much.
I'll just go right now.
Yeah, and it's very funny. And and so yeah, all the courses are on there, and it also gives the dates of when I'm teaching in other cities.
Great.
And we're looking for a new venue in Vancouver right now because Vancouver is a very expensive place to try and do what we do here, and they don't
Just
have
to find
the
a venue
infrastructure.
for it, I guess.
It's really odd that they have such a vibrant production community there, but they don't have the infrastructure that we have here.
No.
The available infrastructure. I teach at the Mainline Theatre in Montreal, and it's glorious because I'm in a theatre. You know, I take my little portable video studio with me, and it takes me 10 minutes to set it up, and I'm in a shooting blue screen environment, and away we go. And it's so rewarding to watch actors succeed.
Well, why don't we take another break, and we'll be right back with Ron Leech. Not Rick Leach from the Blue Jays.
I wish I had his money.
Well, that's because you don't know sports.
Right.
We're not at the sporting community. 2 of our 500 viewers like sports.
Wooers?
Even during the boom years, we didn't have the facility to build celebrity. Because
English language stuff, there's no celebrity. Because I think
it's because it's a producerial market and it's not a directorial market.
And we spend too much, because of the infestation of the American cinematic ideal, English-Canadian work often feels like it's trying to
emulate America.
Emulate American
I
stuff.
agree with that.
Whereas the Quebecois stuff is indigenous.
They're trying to emulate Quebecois stuff.
They're just being who they are.
But as an actor, the dream is to be the celebrity Hollywood guy, where you go, you know, you want to be an actor, you go, I'm going to go to LA for pilot season, I'm going to try and be that whole process.
Yeah.
Is it real? Is it fake? Like, what's your...
Well, they do it, but...
They do it. A number succeed. I think the vast number fail. But they fail for the wrong reasons. The actors who go down to pilot.
Well, we're recording still, right?
Yeah. The actors who fail going to Los Angeles fail for not because their desire or their talent isn't evident. They fail because they haven't actually been business people. If you're moving into any market that you're unfamiliar with and you don't do your research into that market to find out what infrastructure you need to support your business, then you're going to go down there and just chew through your cash and come home with your tail between your legs. Los Angeles is like anywhere. You know, an actor moving from Montreal to Toronto, the first thing they do is drop into the actor office, pick up a list of all the agents, all the casting directors. They check out all the facilities where auditions happen. They go to the equity office. They find out where all the theater companies are and who's auditioning. They pick up a copy of Backstage, you know, and away they go. And then these people think that they can, you know, catch a bus to Los Angeles and stand at the corner of Hollywood and Vine and get discovered. And, you know, L.A. is a city that exists in breakfast meetings and house parties. And there isn't a kind of convivial environment like we have in Toronto where actors get to intermix and help each other.
Well, L.A. is so sodden, though.
And L.A. has 60,000 actors who are members of the union, let alone who knows how many people. There was a very interesting thing I saw, I think it was on Entertainment Tonight or something, where they took a camera out to Glendale or somewhere in Los Angeles, and they parked a camera in front of a multiplex theater, and as everybody walked out of the theaters, they asked them if they could have a moment of their time and what did they do for a living, and everybody said, well, I'm a taxi driver, but I've written a script, right? Because there was a camera in front of them and they didn't know who was shooting them. They had to push their story, and absolutely every single person was hawking a story, and that's such an LA experience. Whereas here, you know, people almost sheepishly tell you that they're an actor second, but they're you know, a waiter at Flo's first, and
that's where they make their money.
And sad but true. But
and,
you know, but I would argue with that.
Recalls.
But I would argue with that, and I would say to you that an actor who knows that understands their business and who knows how to promote themselves, who knows how to run a business, an independent business, will get ahead. Because they will understand their marketplace. I mean, David Hirsch is a great example. David arrived in Toronto without knowing a soul. He moved here from New York after having a fairly successful career in Manhattan. He produced a very successful play off Broadway called Hitler's Love Letters. Why do I remember these things? And I met him just coincidentally at Flo's Diner when it was on Bel Air. I was having lunch with some people. David recognized somebody and came in off the street. I recognized his name because I had read the review of his play the day before in an old issue of the New Yorker magazine that was in my doctor's office. Like, talk about an alignment of the planets. This meeting was meant to happen. And I listened to David. He was very intelligent and impassioned, and he followed up. He phoned me, and we had coffee. And I said, you know what? I said, I like you. And I said, you know, you've obviously got talent. I like your reviews. I've read your resume. I said, you don't know a thing about this marketplace. Why don't you come and be my reader? You'll make a little bit of money. I'll try you out on this one job. If it works, you know, you'll meet all the best actors in the city. You'll hear all the scuttlebutt in the reception room. You'll quickly find out who the good agents are, who the bad agents are, who's doing what, who's...
Where did this come from?
I don't know. It's
just all of a sudden it changes.
It's like magic.
It's like a cut in a 1950s monster movie.
Paul Lynde.
Yeah.
Bewitched. Look, that just changed.
Oh my goodness, center square.
Now that was Cliff Arquette.
So you were saying, Ron, now that we're doing this very intimate
I was
powwow.
talking about
David Hirsch.
actors
David
need
Hirsch.
to be business people, and David is a prime example of that. I mean, you know, Tim Southam, when a wonderful director, was working with me on To Kink in My Hair. He said one day we'll all be working for David Hirsch, and I thought that was a really good analysis because David was a smart businessman. He came in to work as my reader. From his position as reader, he found the actors that he wanted to align himself with. Within a year, he had pulled together a group of actors, including Martha Henry and, you know, some marvelous performers, and did the Dorian Gray project for Bravo. And suddenly he was producing, and he was, you know, making things happen. And from networking, social networking, from within the casting room, from within the talent community, he got an A-listed agent, he got a great publicist, he got a great manager, he got like on the short list for every keynote job that was going down in Toronto, and he was unknown here. And you can do that in your market, but if you get off the train and you don't know where to begin to look, you know, and you don't even know where to begin. And this the tragedy of the entertainment industry is there's so many people who prey upon people's hope to have a career in this business, and their naivete that it is a business called show, and you have to do business. If you opened a hardware store on College Street,
Yes.
right, and you didn't,
James doesn't get that.
you didn't. No, I know, but we do. And if you open the hardware store and you fill the shelves with products to sell, and you hang your shingle out, but then you don't tell anybody in the neighborhood that you're there, you can't be surprised that you don't have any walk-in traffic.
Right.
For an actor, an up-to-date photograph, being present on A-Action auditions, on the casting workbook, you know, on Now Casting, paying for those subscriptions to be on those sites, to make sure you are registered with Breakdown Services and with Converse Smith here in Toronto, so that you're in their system.
Yeah.
And that when I'm searching for talent, I'm finding you. And because I search all the time for actors, both to keep myself present and aware of who's in the community, and to service my producers who are looking for faces and looking for names that aren't overexposed or that are new and that have great voices and great talent and great looks to bring life to their projects. And actors aren't in the system, they don't get a chance. You know, most actors find out that they were perfect for something when they see somebody else doing it.
Right.
And they didn't even know it was being cast. You know, so you have to know you are your product. The classes that you've taken are your inventory. That's your talent, right? Your marketing arm is your agent, your manager, and your publicist, and your lawyer, right? And your marketing tools are your picture and your resume, your registration for all these different sources that are resource forks for casting to find actors. And you have to look at the pyramid that builds business and put yourself into the building blocks of it.
Yeah.
But then don't just buy a spot and sit there and wait. Go make something happen. You know, when Dean Gabry graduated from Ryerson, he came to see me and asked for advice. And so I helped him get his pictures, and I helped him get an agent. And I said to him, but don't wait for your agent to call. I said, you've just come out of a theater experience through school. You have actors that you probably like to work with. I said,
together.
Why don't you put a show together? I'll help you. Famous last words.
But
because he showed up 3 months later with a group of actors and a play by John Patrick Shanley that they wanted to produce. That was the foundation of Acme Theatre. 5 years later, that theater company became nonprofit and went on to produce 10 years worth of vibrant theater in Toronto, winning a Dora Mavor Moore Award. We went from producing plays for $5,000 to the last play we produced cost $110. And made stars out of all the people in those shows. You know, Dean is now a resident director at Stratford. You know, and almost every person who was in our core company has gone on to great careers in the business because they knew that they had to find an outlet for their talent. And they couldn't wait for other people to give it to them. So they gave it to themselves. And then we followed. And I think that that's a great example that's homegrown right here. But that's what Philip Seymour Hoffman did with his theater company in New York. That's what, I can't think of, Steppenwolf in Chicago. All those actors from the Steppenwolf company. Gary Sinise, right? He was a local actor in Chicago. Formed a theater company. Next thing you know, he's got shows on Broadway. You know, he's sweeping the Jeff Awards in Chicago and he's exporting his shows to New York. Now he's CSI, you know, everywhere, right? 24/7. And it's like, this is how talent works. Helen Shaver, when I first met Helen, she was working as a cocktail waitress in the Hostility Lounge at the film festival, mixing martinis for producers. And she was handing out cards, postcards, just like this for my movie, to every producer. That she was using her postcards as a coaster. Here's your martini, sir. Boom. And there's her face, and there's her play, which was playing across town. And she was saying, come and see me in my show. How brilliant was she?
it's amazing.
And nobody knew Helen at that time, but they knew her a year from then because she was everywhere, because she made sure she was. And I think the mistake that actors make is that they absent themselves from being proactive in their own career. They think all they have to do is be talented, but you don't. You have to be more than that because it's a dog-eat-dog world. There's so much competition, and there's always somebody waiting in the wings to take your job. Always. And I think if you make sure that you are on stage, that you're front and center, if you make your own films, if you produce your own plays, if you have podcasts, then you will find an audience because there's so many people out there looking for something to entertain them. And this I know, when you on stage or in film or television or on radio or even in a commercial, when you make someone watching feel the way your character feels at a moment in time, they never forget that you changed them. That's the building block of stardom. People start following you when you make them feel something. And they never forget that. I remember every moment in the theater when I shrieked or when I laughed or when I cried. And where I was and who did it. Because you're bound to that person because you're united by a common feeling. And that's going back to event definition in scenes. That's the unity of this, right? That moment that pushed the story forward, if you make the story move forward with an emotional transition that touches the audience, they're with you forever. And they'll follow you and follow you and follow you.
Amazing. Ron Leech, we've got to go. We're almost out of tape.
Yeah.
Thanks for
We've
coming
already-
in.
I do
today.
that to people.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
We'll see you next time on Cast This. I'm James Scott.
I'm Ryan Goldhart.
Bye-bye.
Right.
The fastest sign off. Yeah. Wow, choreography and everything.